Welcome to my channel. In this video I'll explain about what is defect in software world and what are different details associated with the defect, and then what is the defect life cycle, meaning like from the time defect is created till it is resolving, what are different stages it goes through and who are all different owners at each stage. Okay, let's get started. So first, what is defect? So for any given use case, any deviation from expected functionality is called defect. The deviation can be either functionality wise, performance wise, it can be either memory leak, either security or whatever it is. Basically, let's say if customer is given some use case and let's say developer completed the development, and when QA team is actually validating it, if they feel like okay, from customer side we're expecting so and so, but the actual implementation is not matching that, then we say like okay, let's create a defect. So that's the overall definition of defect. And when we create a defect, so definitely for each defect we have to provide some data so that it will be easy when developers see the defect and then fixing also. So let's go through some of the important attributes that are needed for every defect. So first one is like title. So for every defect we need to provide a title so that it is easy to understand like what the defect is overall about. Second is description. In the description we'll clearly explain the business use case, like what it was not working. It can be either functionality wise, performance wise, whatever it is. That's where the description helps. Priority and severity, these are very two important, which will help in deciding like whether it should be fixed now or can it be pushed to later release, etc. So priority defines like how faster we need it for business. Severity defines, let's say if we don't fix it, what is the customer impact? Is it like very high, medium or low? And then category will helps to determine is it a functional defect or is it performance defect, security, memory leak, battery consumption, or is it localization, etc, etc. And then steps to reproduce. When QA team create a defect, developer wants to know like hey, if I want to reproduce the defect, how can I do? These steps to reproduce will help. Hey, if you follow so and so steps, you will be able to reproduce the defect. Expected result. From business side, for this use case, they are expecting output as A, but actual result, let's say if it is not A, then let's say like okay, we'll document what is the actual result. And then test environment. Why do we need test environment? Let's say from QA side, we might be validating the functionality in different server or a different OS version, etc, etc, and maybe it might be reproducible only for new customers or existing customers, etc. That's where test environment details will help. Logs. Let's say if you see some crash, it can be like website or app, whatever it is, then providing the logs will definitely help for a developer to trace back like what is the root cause. The last one is like screenshots or video. Whenever some issue is happening, if you can provide a screenshot or from the starting to beginning, if you can provide the video, that will help a lot for dev teams to fix the issue and to find out the root cause basically. Let's go with one example on how to create a defect. So let's take an example. So I hope you all know what's WhatsApp. In WhatsApp, you can basically send a message and make a calls. So let's assume hypothetically for our scenario, WhatsApp messaging not working on specific OS version. In this case, let's say iOS 14 devices, and then QA team want to report a defect. By the way, the defect can be reported by either QA team, UAT team or dev team itself when they were doing the testing. So what details, how do we report this defect? By considering all the defect attributes. First, the title. So in the title, we clearly said like what is the OS and what is the environment, and then brief description of the defect, saying like hey, WhatsApp not able to send a message. That's like a title. And then when we go to the description, here we provide like detailed explanation like what the defect is about. Example, here we are saying messaging feature is not working on iOS 14 devices on latest app version. I just took one example like 10.2.5, whatever it is, and but working on iOS 15 devices, and we are clearly saying like, hey, this is not happening in production, looks like it is only with the latest version. That's how we are saying like no error message is displayed to customer, and verified with existing prod version, able to send the message, everything is good, it's happening only with the latest build what QA team is using. And then for this priority we set high, severity we set high, because if the messaging functionality itself is not working, definitely we cannot proceed further with the launch. And then category, because it is related to functionality, we created a functional. Let's say let's take another example. If you are sending a message is sent, but the delay is more. Let's say if the accepted delay is like 1 second, if it is taking 3 or 4 seconds, then we provide the category as performance. Similarly for all other use cases. And then steps to reproduce. So here are the clear details we provide while creating defects, so that it will be very easy when dev try to reproduce the issue. We'll say like install latest app version on iOS 14 device, click on chats, select contact, type message, and then click on send, so that they know like how to reproduce the defect. This is like straightforward scenarios, but in some cases you will see very specific steps to follow. That's where steps to reproduce will actually help. Expected result, in our case, when the customers try to send a message should be sent. Actual result, message not sent. And what is the test environment? We are clearly providing what is the app version, what is the OS version, and what are test account details. Here we can provide example, what is the sender and receiver details, logs. For our use case, we can take device logs and server logs. Since it is app, from app side you can take logs, and then similarly at server level also, if there are any errors, we can take those logs and then add it to the defect. And then screenshots or video. So when this is happening, so we can take a video of like what we are actually doing from start to end, so that dev can easily go through and then see like what's the issue. Apart from developer, it will help product team also when they see the defect, and if we have all these attributes, it will help them prioritizing the defects also. That's about like defect attributes, and what is the defect definition, and what are different attributes we provide for each defect, and an example. So I hope it gives like some context on like what is the defect and how to create whenever we see any defects as part of our testing. Now let's dive deep on like what is the defect life cycle. Life cycle means like from the time you create a defect till the time it is resolved, what are different steps and different owners it goes through. So that's what like defect life cycle is all about. So here is the defect life cycle. So be it like QA team or dev team or whichever team, whenever they find a defect, whenever they are doing testing, whenever they feel like okay, this functionality is not working as expected, then we report a defect. There are different tools to report defect. Based on each organization, they might use different. Example, Jira is there, similarly HP Quality Center is there. There are so many other tools. So ultimately, like whenever we see any deviation from the expected results, we create a new defect. The moment we create a defect, it will be assigned with status as new, and then based on Jira and different tools, we can configure different statuses, but this is like high level overview how it works. And then once the defect is created, whoever is the reporter, be it QA team or UAT team, they provide all the attributes and all the details, and then those defects will be triaged with product and dev teams. Triaged in the sense like every day based on the organization standards and team standards, they kind of set up a meeting saying like, hey, we found so many so and so defects, let's go through all the defects and prioritize them, so that those defects can be picked by the dev teams and then work on it, so that QA can verify and then release it to the customer in the next launch. That's the overall objective of triage. Once the triage is done, in the triage we will decide like okay, whether it is a valid defect or not. Let's say if it is not valid, then we will try to resolve them, and then while resolving we will check. So there might be multiple reasons why it is invalid. So it can be either duplicate defect of existing one, or it can be not reproducible at all. It was like, and then it might be not a bug at all. Let's say like we are trying to report some functionality that is not implemented at all, or that is not supported at all. So in that case we will say like not a bug. So not reproducible, let's say we create a defect but it is not reproducible now. Maybe it was happening because of test environment issues or something like that. That's when we say like resolution not reproducible. If there is an already defect, then we resolve it as with resolution duplicate. So finally the status will be updated as resolved. So let's go through the positive case where defect is valid, and then when the defect is valid, then we will try to take the inputs from product team. Should it be fixed now, or can it be fixed in the follow-up release? So product team thinks like, okay, this is a defect, but this is not something that is actually blocking our release. So we can actually defer it we can actually fix it in the next release or later. So when the product team decides like it can be fixed in the later releases, that's what we mark it as deferred, so that it will move the status to deferred. Let's say product team prioritize and we want to fix it in the current release. That's when, okay, as part of this triage, now the defect is prioritized for current release, and based on the feedback from product team we updated like right priority and severity. Once it is done, then the status will be updated as open, and then it will be assigned to the development team. So what will happen, the next team, like any regular development life cycle, dev will start working on it. So they will change the status to in progress, and then once the code changes, or it can be either code changes, configuration changes, whatever it is, as soon as it is done, those changes will be sent for review. The respective dev, whoever is the reviewer, they will review it, and then they will, while the review is in progress, the status will be updated as code review. And then once the code review is done, everything is completed from dev side, it will be assigned to QA. That's where the status will be updated. Mostly in most of the tools it will be either ready for QA or pending QA verification. So that's where QA team will come into picture. Basically, as soon as the defect is ready for QA or pending QA verification, it will be assigned back to the reporter, mostly either QA or UAT or whoever actually reported the defect. So that's when like QA will start verifying the defects. So QA verification. So now QA team will check like, okay, whether this defect is working as expected or not. Let's say in our example, previously the message were not sent on iOS 14 devices. So we'll go back, install the app on iOS 14, and we'll check like is the customer able to send a message now or not. Let's say if it is working, then we'll say like, okay, the defect is fixed, and we will resolve the defect. And then whilst closing the defect, we will choose the resolution as fixed. And then let's say if the defect is not fixed, then we'll reopen the defect, so that it will go back to the developer with the status as open. And then again this cycle will go through till the time the defect is addressed and ready for launch. So there you might get questions like, hey, we are resolving the defect, and what is the use of this resolution? So this resolution will help us in the later phases if you want to know like, okay, out of total 100 defects reported, how many are valid defects, and then how many are like invalid. It can be like either duplicate defects, not reproducible, or not a valid bug. So by collecting all this data, it will help us as a overall to help a quality of development org and QA org. All these fixed defects, because since we have like so many frequently are recurring patterns, that will help dev team to improve the code quality. Similarly from QA side, based on the resolution, if all of them are like fixed defects, then it is well and good. Wherever we are reporting duplicate or not reproducible or not a bug, so these will help to retrospect and see like where can QA team improve to provide quality defects, and then it will in turn help everyone to save times. That's all overall defect life cycle. Please let me know if you have any suggestions or inputs so that we can improve. Thank you.